I'm Citlali. I'm a first year at MIT, and I'm planning to study either electrical engineering and computing or bioengineering.
Got it. And let's talk about what was your initial reaction when you got that acceptance letter?
So I'm actually a QuestBridge kid, so it wasn't
Hmm.
just an acceptance to MIT, it was also like a, hey, you're going here on a full ride. So that was a lot of overwhelming, obviously very exciting, but
Hmm.
overwhelming news all at once.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm on a full ride to NYU as well, and that's like the best thing ever because you don't have to worry about debt or anything. You're basically just studying for free. All right. When did you first consider MIT as a possibility? Was it like always a dream school, or did it become one later?
It was definitely one later. I was very unsure of my college process,
Hmm.
my high school journey, because I am a first generation low income kid. So I
Okay.
didn't have a lot of guidance from my family. So a lot of what I heard about the college application process and which colleges are good and whatnot came from the students around me. And MIT was always like a background thought. It wasn't really a focus until I found out about the QuestBridge program in my junior year, and that's when I really started to look into it. And I was like, yeah, hey, I kind of like this place.
Got it.
I think a little bit, yes,
Mhm.
because they would always toss around these ideas about what the college application was like in general.
Mhm.
But because I was looking at it from a different standpoint through the QuestBridge application, it did look a little different from what the usual common app way that they all did it. So it was impactful about how I thought about the college application process up until I had a little bit more directionality.
Got it. Now, what do you think specifically drew you to MIT over like other elite schools?
Specifically to MIT was a lot of the statistics regarding like first generation low income students
Mhm.
and the financial aid programs that they were advertising, especially because I went to like I attended some of like their online info sessions, and also they had financial aid meeting in person in my hometown. So I went to that and that was helpful. So yeah, a lot of it did have to do with finances, but also I knew for a while that I wanted to go into something more STEM related, and MIT just seemed like the place for that.
Got it. Makes sense. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about your stats. So, what was your GPA and test scores that got you into MIT?
My GPA was a 4.0 on a
Mm-hmm.
4.0 scale, unweighted, and then weighted it was a 5.28 out of
Mm-hmm.
5. SAT was a super score of 1500,
Okay,
760 reading, 740 math.
got it. And what was the typical range for your school at that point?
I think it was somewhere in the 1300s, like 1350.
I mean, I think that's a very good average, no?
I think
Considering
so.
a lot of schools, yeah. And let's talk about your ranking. Were you ranked number one in your class, or were there people ahead of you? What was the situation?
We didn't do class rank. It wasn't something that was released.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have cum laude society, which takes the top 10 of each graduating class. So I was in the top 10.
All right, really quickly, if you found value in this podcast so far, I've been exactly where you are. I'm sharing the exact case studies, doing live Q&As, and free one-on-one calls because I wish someone had done this for me. So it's free, but we're going to be closing soon. So join with the first link in the description, and let's get back to the interview. Got it. And how did you feel about your academic profile when you compare it to other applicants? MIT is a very tough school, everyone's cracked at everything, basically.
It felt a bit subpar
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of like the classes that I was taking, because especially as someone who wants to go into engineering, there wasn't a lot of like physics options at my school.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of extracurriculars though, I felt decent about those. I did one pre-college program one summer, and then I started a club at my school, service program at my school. So, I showed initiative to those things. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in that aspect of having ambition and knowing how to put that into action.
Okay, and you said that you had a 1500 SAT. What was your starting score? What was your final score?
The first ever SAT I took, I got a 1430, and my
Mm-hmm.
final in a single sitting was a 1480.
Okay. And like, how much time did you spend it between those? And like, how did you practice? Stuff like that.
If I'm going to be honest, I did not practice.
Okay. Doesn't make sense, but sure. And like, how long before your application deadline did you have like your final SAT score that you knew, oh, just gonna go with this one?
My final SAT was October of senior year, which was like about a month before my final match applications were submitted.
And I have so many students in my DMs like asking about this timing. Like, if you had to juggle like essays and SAT prep, like, how did you manage both?
Essays was just in terms of brainstorming what I was going to talk about in my essay. I was always on the lookout for during over like the summer and like near the end of my junior year. I was thinking about it just so that I could gather some ideas. And then once I actually got to sitting down and writing, the ideas flowed a little better. And it was mostly a thing of parsing those ideas down.
Okay. And like, did your school offer APs? And did you like feel pressure to take every single AP offered?
Yes, we had APs. Yes, there was a bit of pressure. My school was slightly academically rigorous, so I did feel some pressure to take a few, but not that to the point where I would put it above classes that weren't AP that still interested me.
Okay, and like how many APs did you take? And like, did you get all fives on your AP exams, or did you have like some fours or threes like most people?
I took AP World sophomore year, the only AP that you could take in sophomore year. Freshman, you couldn't take any. Junior year, I took APUSH and AP Lang. And then senior year, I took AP Bio, AP French, AP Calc BC, AP Comp Gov, and AP Lit. I got fives on all of those except for APUSH. I got a 4.
Okay. And like, and how did you balance like taking all of these challenging courses while maintaining your GPA and like while doing all of the college apps and the extracurriculars and everything?
I'd say consistently being aware of like what I was struggling with so that I could ask for help on those specific items during office hours helped with balancing all of those. And then also looking at assignments from like breaking down assignments into smaller goals so that they wouldn't feel as daunting in the long run, and I kind of had a better estimate of how long it would take and what I could do in a single afternoon in terms of my assignments. And then just for the college process, I just had to have some discipline in guaranteeing that I would have about like an hour and a half per week, somewhere around that range, to work on my applications.
Okay. Now let's talk about your extracurriculars. And so like, when did you really start focusing seriously on building your extracurricular profile?
I'd say sophomore year is when I started to be more aware of which clubs to join. And then junior year is when I started seeking out opportunities of my own. Like I said, starting my own club and applying for things over the summer as well. And then senior year was just continuing what I started in junior year and making sure that I was consistent in the amount of effort and energy I was putting into those activities.
Got it. And like, do you think there was like a moment where you realized, oh, I need to lock in for my college application extracurriculars, or was it just random?
No, it was more like if I felt passionate about something and I felt it was worth doing, then yeah, I stuck with it.
And like, what were you doing before that point that made you realize, okay, let's start focusing on extracurriculars?
I would attend club sessions for clubs that I showed maybe only like a slight interest in, but maybe they didn't fit my schedule or they overlapped with clubs that I deemed more important to my personal values.
Okay. And like, can you walk us through a couple of your extracurriculars? What do you think, like, which one do you think made the admissions officers take notice the most?
I'd say I was definitely one of the ones that I always prioritized what in junior and senior year was my own club, which was game development club. I started that and led that with a fellow classmate. And so I think that helped in my applications because I was talking about the club in terms of a leader's point of view, how I managed meetings, and how I made sure that my club didn't only exist but was also actively doing something. And apart from that, my school offered interdisciplinary seminars, so it was something that you applied for, and if you got in, then it was like an hour before school officially started on Fridays, and they were offered voluntarily by teachers. They're on a lot of different topics. And the one that I did was an engineering solutions seminar, which I applied for my sophomore year, didn't get in, but reapplied my junior year. Really enjoyed it, loved the work that I was doing in there, and did it again senior year.
Okay, and would you say like your extracurricular profile was scattered or was it mostly in one niche?
They were a bit scattered. I did
Mm-hmm.
also do Quiz Bowl for sophomore through senior year. I also added Model UN senior year, which was very different from my usual extracurriculars. So I'd say about like half of my extracurriculars were more in the STEM niche, and then the other half were just personal interests. Like I also joined Moxie Club, which is like a feminist group at my school.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a bit more humanitarian activities in there.
And like I get a lot of questions from people, from students specifically with scattered activities. So like how would you say you made sure they all put forward like a consistent narrative in your application?
Yeah, I definitely talk more about like how they work towards my goals in higher education and beyond. For example, with my experience in Model UN, I talked a lot about, being a communicator and knowing how to like adapt to a different setting, because that was like I said, it was very different from my usual activities. And tying that into like, well, for some more context, my school gets 6 seats for this national conference, which is called SDLC, the Student Diversity Leadership Conference. So I kind of tied those two activities together, talking about being a leader or just being in in a community and knowing how to exchange ideas and move a group forward. I tied that into like my goals as an engineer in getting into industry and, like project management type of things and whatnot.
Okay, moving on, like how do you think you should quantify impact when your numbers aren't huge? Because a lot of people have these clubs and like they don't have like a million members or stuff like that, you know? How do you think you should do that?
That kind of relates to my game development club because it was relatively small. It was like 12 people per year.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely highlighting the work put out of that effort helps. Like even though we were only 12 people, we had people splitting off into like pairs or groups of 3 that would work towards making like games by the end of the year. So highlighting how those numbers work in the long run and how that still outputs some sort of project or effort or impact.
Okay, got it. And how do you think admissions officers recognize that you genuinely cared about your activities or stuff like that?
I'd say it's definitely in the language of how you talk about them,
Mm-hmm.
because it's easy to sound robotic about something that you're not passionate about. But if you really cared about the activities that you're doing, then language just sounds more heartfelt and natural.
Okay. And a lot of this is about like being authentic in your application as well,
Mhm.
right? So like how do you think you can be authentic while you're literally trying to impress like some of the best admissions officers, some of and the best colleges?
I think I'd say not listening too much to outside sources in terms of
Mm-hmm.
applications, because even I fell victim to scrolling on like college advice on TikTok and whatnot. And I think sometimes that can be good in terms of knowing the general ideas of what not to do. But when it gets a bit more niche and more personal to who you are as a person, it should definitely be a priority to let your ideas roll off first and then go back and edit them. Maybe the language can be parsed a little more in your essays and short essays. But I think initially just letting your ideas flow so that you recognize what out of your ideas is most important.
Got it. Okay. Moving on. Let's talk about your awards and honors. So like how strong do you think your awards and honor section was? Did you feel competitive in that area? Let's talk about that.
I think a fair amount of my awards and honors were on the school level, but I had second place in my state for Science Olympiad and Anatomy and Physiology. I had a national award for the National Center for Women in Technology. So, and then I also had national gold medal for a French contest, the Grand Concours. And so it felt slightly, in terms of it being listed out, it felt slightly competitive. But when I talked about those awards in a bit more depth and how much they meant to me as a person and what it took to achieve that, that's where it felt more personal and stronger.
Got it. All right, let's move on and let's talk about your essays. So, how would you say how did you turn your journey into compelling essays that got you into MIT?
Yeah, so the way I went about my essay is that I identified the biggest part of my identity as a person, the biggest parts, I would say. Like one aspect in terms of who I am as a student, one aspect in terms of who I am in like outside of school, in terms of like hobbies and interests. Then another aspect and parts of, in terms of who I am, like mentally, like how I see the world, and tying that all into how that has led me to my goals and ambitions as an engineer,
Got it. And like, how would you say you made your story stand out in terms of?
including personal anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
The intro to my essay was a personal anecdote, and then sprinkling in very niche details in terms of who I am, like not being very generic, like, oh, this is what I do, this is how I do it, but just making the language seem a lot more personal by recounting certain events in my life that made that aspect of my identity, made me realize that that aspect of my identity is important.
Got it. And I think it might be a struggle for you as well, but I think a lot of students struggle with finding that personal anecdotes. And so how would you say we should go around and brainstorm those?
Uh, yeah, I'd say talk to friends or family, people that know you very well and who you share like inside jokes with, or who can recall these events that make them like you as a person, or with family, childhood stories, something that you did as a child that was funny to them, or that made them realize this aspect of who you are as a person. I think that helps to jog your memory of the things that really matter to you and have shaped, in whatever way, big or small, the person that you are now.
Did you worry that your story wasn't dramatic or impressive enough when you were writing your Common App essay?
Definitely, yeah. And I think in order to counteract that, it really came from the storytelling method, or like the narrative, the words that I use, how I use dialogue throughout it, how I use certain syntactical methods to
Mm-hmm.
enhance the story. Because I think then again, admissions officers don't want to see something so dramatic. They will appreciate something that's very personal and doesn't seem as grandiose as you think it does.
Got it. Moving on, let's talk about your supplemental essays. So, like, which MIT supplemental essay was the most challenging to write for you?
There was only one supplemental for me, which was why do you want to study your field of interest at MIT? And I think the first part of that, why do you want to study your field of interest, was easy because I had these experiences during my high school years that
Mm-hmm.
gradually led me towards that. But the most important part for me, and the part that I struggled with, was the at MIT part. So that took a lot of thinking about what exactly was attracting me to the school apart from just a name. A lot of research and some digging on the internet to figure out what opportunities I would seek out as a student there. So I really had
Okay.
to see myself already as an MIT student to understand how I was going to achieve my long-term goals.
Let's talk about your college selection strategy. So, like, what did your college list look like? Did you have any safeties? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so as a QuestBridge finalist, you're not supposed to apply to other schools besides your state schools.
Okay.
And there was only one state school that I was interested in, which was Clemson University, because I'm from South Carolina. So if QuestBridge wasn't going to work out, then of course I had some ideas as backups in terms of other safeties and targets that weren't already on my QuestBridge list, because all QuestBridge schools are selective. So yeah, but in terms of the QuestBridge process, once I found out that I was a finalist, it was really a thing of what school could offer me the best for what I was looking for during
Got
my.
it. Okay. All right. Let's talk about recommendation letters now. Did you ever guide or prepare your recommenders by sharing like a brag sheet so they could write stronger letters? And like, how did you approach that conversation if you did?
Yeah, so I had my French teacher and my AP Bio teacher write recommendations for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my AP Bio teacher sent me actually no, she had me email her like a brag sheet basically, which was like a summary of some of the activities that from my resume that I deemed the most important to who I am. And then she also knows me not just from AP Bio, but from another class that I had taken
Okay.
year before. So we had a close connection already, a bit more personal. And then my French teacher, she was my teacher for 3 years. So again, she and I had a bit of a closer relationship. But similarly to what I did with my AP Bio teacher, I emailed her a very succinct list from my resume of what appeared, what I thought was relevant and would be important to admissions officers.
Got it. And like, what do you think? What did you provide to your recommenders to help them write compelling recommendation letters?
Like I said, I emailed them some of my activities from my resumes and with like brief descriptions, 1 to 2 sentences of what it was. And then if it was something that they were more familiar with, then I explained more personally of like the impact that it had on me as a person. Like, for example, with my AP Bio teacher, one of the things that I talked about in terms of from a more personal standpoint was the class that she had offered that year before AP Bio,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a unique experience to me. Basically, it was like a research class, a biotechnology research class. So, and it's only open to like 6 students per year. And you have to go through this whole application cycle to get in. And so I was a bit more clear with her about like the impact that that had on me choosing to go more into engineering and specifically potentially bioengineering.
Okay, I think this makes like a lot of context. I think it'll be very helpful for students as well. What do you think would you tell a junior who feels like they've wasted their first 2 years of high school, and how should they make their academic comeback?
I think sitting down and thinking to yourself, what is most important to me as a person? Like, how do I want to split my time? Because realistically, you only have so many hours in a week, and you're splitting that between school and extracurriculars. So being succinct about what you're doing is helpful. Knowing if you want to be in this club, you have to know how many hours you're putting into it. You have to know how much it's going to take outside of club meeting times. And if you're looking into maybe adding a new extracurricular, then familiarizing yourself with it before jumping into it. Talking to the faculty leader of the club or other students that have done it or your friends that are maybe doing it. And then in terms of classes, I think it's often helpful to have a well-rounded schedule. So while you may want to pursue a major more in the humanities, you still want to make sure that your transcript is well-rounded and you show that you are still putting in effort in all fields of study.
Got it. I think this will be very helpful for students. Last question. What advice do you have for students with good but not perfect stats?
I think showing the correlation between your classes and your stats, because, for example, my SAT was below that of an average MIT student, and I didn't take as many APs as other students here have. And so I think kind of showing that the grades that I was getting in APs wasn't due to like grade inflation or anything, but that I could actually show that I was academically good by providing my SAT scores to, test optional schools. I think, especially with test optional schools, it's important to still provide it because that helps put into perspective your grades and how you do on like standardized exams. Also, if you have the chance to upload a school profile to your application, I think that's also helpful because that puts you in perspective of the other students at your school, the other kids in your graduating class. And that often helps admissions officers see the effort that you're putting into, and maybe you're doing more, maybe you're not doing as much as other kids at the school that you're trying to apply to, but you're definitely doing more than other kids at your school. So it shows that you're going above the bounds of your environment.
Got it. Thank you so much for your time. It was amazing having you